are in the Scaling Tableau in the Enterprise. Yet another one. Cores, Community, and Crowdsourcing. Looked like that in the site that showed our abstract. I want to point out that this is not a beginner class. I hope they mean by that we're just not going to cover anything that totally blows your mind. And while it says it's IT and server admin, we're actually doing a little of, what was it called, enablement as well. So there's going to be a mix. We're going to start out with what you would consider IT and server administration. And then when we wrap up, we'll be talking about something a little bit different. You want to talk about Biztory?
Yeah, that's me actually. Well, not just me, but Biztory is a company I work for, and we're a consulting company based in Belgium and a few other countries in Europe. And well, I think the first sentence there just says it quite well. We help you get answers from data easier, faster, is what we do. We do a little more than that, than just that. There's all kinds of services that we offer. But for those, we're not going to talk about that now, but we have a booth downstairs at the ground floor where you can drop by and visit us. So yeah, you can get to know us there if you feel like it.
And I'm from Cargill. Oh, I need the mic. I'm from Cargill. Cargill's a large company that provides agriculture, food, a lot of other businesses to throughout the world. We're in 70 different countries, been around a little over 150 years. We have 155,000 employees worldwide, which you'll hear that number again in just a little bit. We're not going to dwell too long on that because we've got other stuff to talk about.
We do.
And my name is David Walker. I work for Cargill. I said that. I am one of the two self-service analytics leads at Cargill. My colleague and I co-lead that group together. I live in Geneva, Switzerland. I telecommute full-time from there, where the rest of the team, with the exception of this guy, is in Minneapolis in the U.S., in Minnesota. We are part of a group called Digital Labs, which is their mission and purpose is to prepare Cargill for a digital future. And Timothy.
Yeah, as for me, yeah, as you've guessed by now, I work as a consultant, in the team with David. Been working at Biztory for a few years and with Tableau for I think 4.5 years by now. Living in Belgium, you see me there, not in my best state actually. I was running a trail run there. It turned out okay in the end, so we did take a picture. But yeah, anything data viz I'm a fan of. That's the way you put it.
And unfortunately, that is my best state. Definitely not today. All right. So when we talk about scaling Tableau in the enterprise, usually the first thing you think about is how many cores? How many workers are we going to need? What are we going to do to configure that? It's not just about those things, though. It's also about people. How the heck do you scale people? Well, before we talk about scaling people, let's talk about where everybody starts with cores. According to Tableau, 8 cores can support how many users? Somebody. I'm hearing guesses. Somebody, put your foot down on it. Okay. So.
You were correct.
According to Tableau, and this is back from 2013 when they first started they put a paper out that defined this. 8 cores can support 100 users on a machine at the same time. Now, we won't talk about, but you'll hear about concurrency as a measurement. But generally when people are talking about how many cores, we're talking about how many users. Today Tableau has changed that slightly. They'll still say 1,000, but that's with a little bit of risk. If you want low risk, they'll tell you to go with 750. But how many users can 8 cores really support? And this is the first part of the story. I brought Tableau into Cargill back at the beginning of 2014. And it was intended to be an add-on to a project I was the lead for a rewrite on a web application that needed something for reporting. I didn't want any of the team to have to be doing hard coding for that, and I wanted the analysts to be able to do a little more exploration than they had been able to do traditionally with the tools and the libraries that we were using. I'd used Tableau a little bit in a previous job, and after looking at all of the other possibilities, Tableau is what we ended up with. Brought Tableau server in, 8 cores, minimal amount of memory, and I think we bought 10 desktop licenses. And this was intended to serve an audience potentially of 200 people globally. These were the traders and analysts in Geneva, Switzerland that were working in the World Trading Group. As we got started on that project, and as all software projects go, things took time, people got bored, designer licenses kind of went off the shelf, people started looking at it, and before I knew it was happening, all 10 were gone and we were buying more. And as is traditionally the case with this kind of story, the next thing you know, you've got hundreds of users. Nobody budgeted for this. It was supposed to be that one server and just a few licenses. There was no money to do anything about it. It was just support them as best I could, and it was not even my job. I was supposed to be finishing that project, and instead, that's where I really got hooked on Tableau, and started spending more and more of my time on that, much to my boss's dismay. But it very quickly spread throughout Geneva and throughout Europe, hopped the continent to North America, and we grew very, very quickly. And as I said, there was no budget for this, and there was no ability to get a budget. There was no help desk, no team. This was the sort of thing, I'm sure some of you have gone through this, where technically what we were doing was a little bit rogue. We had the formal exception to bring Tableau in, but we were in the midst of a large SAP implementation. So something that was self-service was not something that IT wanted to be working with at the time. But there was a need. There were lots of people out there stuck with using tools and having to scrape from reports the data that they needed and then try to hobble together the information that they needed to do their jobs. I mean, we are talking about traders in a very fast-paced moving business that were relying on traditional BI, which didn't work. So as you can imagine, we started getting more and more people, and it wasn't very long before we got to the point where I was doing nothing but supporting Tableau server. And we had about 1,000 users at the time, and you're going to have to excuse me just a minute. I want to make sure I didn't miss something there. And again, no money. We begged, we borrowed, nothing. There was only one thing to do. Roll up the sleeves and learn how to make this thing work. And so I started spending a lot of time down in the depths of the workgroups database. I started learning a lot about performance, how to build some basic primitive tools in order to understand what was going on, workbook performance, and the users kept coming. And it wasn't long before we were at 1,500. And Tableau said 1,000. And I was like, I better do something about this. And I went, asked for money. No. I'm like, but you don't understand. We got too many people. But there was nothing that could be done about it. It was a budget cycle that needed to wait another year. So I just had to roll up my sleeves and get at it harder. And it wasn't long before we were running 2,000 users on a single 8-core machine with only 32 gig of memory. At that point, we began to see a little bit of issues. Our audience was maturing. Things were getting a little more complicated, and we needed to be able to address that. And some of those had become business critical, which was a good help. But by that time, I was not only working very hard at keeping this rolling, I was actually convinced that I had discovered something that Tableau didn't know, and that I had some sort of magic touch that could enable me to run more users on 8 cores than Tableau was saying. So it got to a point where we were negotiating an EA back in December, and we got to talking about pricing. And of course, the whole pricing structure is based on, for the server side, how many users per core, and that's a parameter. And 1,000 was what they had in there, and I'm like, nope, 2,000. And of course, that caused a lot of consternation on both sides, to the point where everything came to a halt. And I had to take a weekend to sit down and try and understand why my sales manager was being so wrong about it. And I know the guy well, he's a good friend, and I was just convinced that there just must be something simple here. It did not take long, after a couple of days of really digging through all that data, to understand that there was something happening other than me just rolling up my sleeves and being able to make this thing work. By the time we got to that point, by the way, we were at 3,000 users. Fortunately, right about that time, we were finally able to convince them that we needed 8 more cores. But I was running 3,000, and it worked. But guess how many hours I was working? And guess what else I was doing? Practically nothing. So you'll hear people talk about, what is that number of users per 8 cores that you can run and able to support your enterprise. I mean, people are always trying to squeeze a little bit more out of that in order to have more resources. I mean, when you start getting at scale, those numbers can look pretty big and a little bit scary, especially to your leadership. But I hadn't discovered anything important or special. I didn't know something that nobody else knew. What I realized was that my hard work, combined with the fact that my community, if you think of Roger's curve, Roger's adoption, that curve, was still in the low end. They were immature. Our workbooks weren't complex. Our data sets were small. Our data sources were not very many. We didn't have that many extracts. We just had a lot of people looking at a lot of simple stuff. Now, it's a little more complex than that, but every case that I've looked at since that time where I've consulted with someone to try and help them understand the same thing, it's come down to that. Now, I really looked very hard in the beginning. What was that magic number? Because, like I said, I didn't have any money. And Tableau said 1,000. Of course, all the bosses think immediately that 1,000 from Tableau means is a number that generates money. And if you looked at the anecdotal evidence in the community, you'd discover similar comments, and they'd always refer back to Tableau, or they'd say it depends. A very important lesson that came out of this is that it doesn't depend. There is an answer, and Tableau is pretty much right. The law of averages tends to come back to that 1,000, and that's 750. Okay, maybe, but the 1,000 number is really a good estimate for understanding how many cores you've got to have for the number of users that you're running in your community. It's really, there isn't, if you look at all the various factors that are involved, and we've only talked about a few of them. I mean, those of you that have looked at this before understand there's quite a lot. That 1,000 for 8 cores is a really good guide to be able to go by. And not only did I discover that, but I discovered what a huge opportunity loss I'd had. The 2 years that I spent, working to keep things going all that time could have been spent on, greater value add. Sure, I had some issues with trying to convince people to spend the money to get the cores. But if I'd focused on that a little bit more, selling that would be a whole lot easier today than it is. And we would be a lot further along with the community. So whenever you're looking at, beginning to do your scaling, and that first thing that comes up is about cores, then just remember, if you look around at the community, if you talk to the people that have done this before, you're going to come back to that same number, and it's a good guide to go by. And ask people like me and the 2 years that I spent working very hard for what amounted to, okay, I'm pretty good at the workgroups database and a few tools to help with performance monitoring. But we did get some good things out of that. It was not just about the experience of learning the workgroups database. I developed some primitive tools that allowed me to collect some data from the server and from the environment and from our users that allowed me to see patterns and to quickly react to them, albeit manually at the time, in order to keep the server running as efficiently as possible. That was some very good foundational knowledge for what we've begun to use today. Is the next one
The answer is actually the next one,
yeah.
which you gave.
I gave. Sorry, PowerPoint is just not my thing. So from all of that, what we learned was tools and techniques that we could take and that we have developed in order to help us continue to do today what we were doing then, but a lot more reasonably. We're able to efficiently manage our environment to be able to handle and to maximize the number of users for what we have. This year might be the first year I'm actually ahead of demand, but if you're like me, most of you out there are always chasing demand. You're never probably quite cored enough. We're undercored still today. And so having these tools and techniques as part of your repertoire is very useful in being able to administer Tableau Server. I was just going to show you. These are some of the original tools that I used to be able to understand what was going on. The bottom one is about load failures. Scheduling, Tableau Server doesn't have. I still yell about that all the time. We put something very primitive together in order to allow users to be able to find slots where extracts could go because we only had the one server. That's where we started. And then Timothy came on board, and we've taken it to a whole new level. And he's going to take over and show you some of those tools and techniques that we've been talking about.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, David. I just want to point out, just to make your point clear, that this doesn't look good, does it? I mean, this is how the extract refreshes were performing, how much load there was on that server, and you just couldn't find the slot almost were you to, schedule a 25-minute extract, which is maybe a bit uncommon. I mean, most of them run shorter, fortunately, in our environment, but that, just goes to show what the situation was at that moment. So before we effectively dive into the tools, and I'm sure that a few of you people, are very interested in those, because after all, the session was qualified as IT and server, it seems. So some of you want to see that. But before that, let's go chronologically and start with, what happened when I did join David's team and start working with them on, let's say, the resolution to the situation we were in. This is around the time, and it's about 8 months ago now. This is around the time where, we started with that realization, where we started, it was known that we had to start scaling out or scaling up to keep this working. But until we had those extra cores that were being asked for, and when I joined the team, we knew there was like a month out before we'd get there, and there was something we had to do because we were really, really pushing the limits. Performance was visibly starting to decline, and this is not something that you want, of course, for any of your users who will, of course, lose their faith in the product when performance gets too bad, when extracts are not being able to get refreshed, etc. So what we started with when I joined was looking into that performance and how we could still make it work for that month until we'd finally get those extra cores that were being asked for. And we were lucky that David had been, forward-looking and had been running Tabmon on the server for quite a while, because that gave us some data to look into what was going on the server and how the processes were acting and how they were, how we could find patterns in those. And so the first thing I did, or actually we did, because we worked on that together, was evolve the vises that were related to Tabmon. And things like this came out of that, which is, I think most of you know what Tabmon does, right? It takes the data from the performance monitor of Windows on your Tableau server, as well as data related to the processes running on Tableau server, and allows you to report on that. And that's what we did in the hope of looking for and finding patterns. which we effectively did. Because as you can see there, this is like a daily view with the red line being what's going on that day itself and the other one being the average. And shows you clear patterns of what's going on. We see here, for example, that our backgrounder here usually seems to spike around that time of the day, so that would give us some idea of what's going on regarding the scheduling of extracts, and is there something we can do based on that. We have the same view on a weekly level where we clearly see daily patterns as well. As you can tell from the VisQL server, people don't really work that much in the weekend. That's all fine. But yeah, so patterns and interesting things that we found there, that obviously wasn't new, the weekend working, but we'd go through the processes, we'd try different combinations, and so we'd gain insights from that and try and reconfigure the server into what we thought would be the optimal way of having it running, which did work out. I'll show you how that average load time evolved as we started doing this. We were able to make it work for that last month until we finally got the cores that we needed. And just before I show you how that evolved, we're still using those visits. The ones we just showed were quite basic, but we evolved them into something that we can look at daily. And this is, a clear overview that gives us very quickly a sight on the status of the server. Is everything running well? Is the disk not, too full? Is the CPU overutilized or whatever? So yeah, I mean, by then or by now, we got time to put effort in the looks of the views, and we get some things that are, I think, actually nice to look at here. Disk I/O. Oh, who can tell? So on the top right, you see the disk and then average read and wrote, and then the disk queue length. What's happening there? Why are there spikes all the time? This is, you can see the scale, right? It's about a week of data. What are those spikes? What do you think they are? Disk being written? A lot. Not extracts? No, it's not actually related to the normal tasks of Tableau server. It's just a backup running. We have a nightly backup running, and so that suddenly pulls all of the data and writes it back. So that's what's happening. It's not very important, but it was just fun to see patterns like that as well. So as I said, I was going to show you how that then evolved, and I have to see. Yeah, I can show it like this. So this is starting from November when I joined. The average load time was, and there's missing data before, but it had been ramping up, and it was peaking around 24, 25 seconds of average load time. Now that is very, very high, but you have to take into account that we allow people and almost anyone to publish their stuff. So some of those are not, they're new to Tableau. They're still learning. They're not quite aware of techniques to optimize performance. So that it sounds like an excuse, I know, but with anyone publishing content, these are realistic times. And so we first, as we were also reconfiguring, we were working with, the, let's say, worst offenders performance-wise to get them to update the workbook to work better. And that paid off already. We made config changes. I think, well, the annotations aren't quite accurate, but the point is that at some point, we finally got those new cores, and then without any additional initiative, without all that work that David had been doing for 2 years, working 25 hours a day, we were able to keep performance at a relatively good level without all those additional efforts. You can see 12 seconds is not bad. It's not good, but it's not bad for a server that hosts thousands of visits that are made by people who, some of whom don't have much experience. So that helps. Adding those cores really proved the point around the fact that you can do all you want and you can get more users to work on 8 cores, but upscale or to actually add those cores will save you a lot of trouble. Now onto those actual new tools that we were discussing, I think, which we promised to show you. So this is also what we'll be doing, and I'm going to see if I can pull this up. Of course. Well, or I think we should probably, unless it's a quick one, we can.
Yeah, maybe just. Why does the holiday season drive worse load time?
It's just an unusual season. There's almost no one working, I think, at Cargill during the holiday season, or it's like quite the drop, and it's just unusual traffic. I think people are opening views that they otherwise wouldn't, and are just playing around. So
It is a global company.
yeah.
So your holiday is not somebody else's. So they might
Right.
be working still.
Yeah, it's just very unusual, I suppose. Okay, some of those views. Let me open this one here. I'll just take a second. While it opens, we identified two main areas that we thought we could, improve on, and I think they have been mentioned before, but to state that, there's on one hand the data side, so everything the backgrounders do, the extract refreshes, the subscriptions, how they perform were one area we were going to focus on, and then the other area is the views themselves and the actual performance of the view, the content that the users were posting. So I'm going to start with showing you what we have, or part of things we have for the area of data and how we work with those. And here's one view on that. And this is what I call it the trends view. I don't know if the name makes much sense, but this is one that we get in our mailbox every day and shows us what the evolution has been for 4 KPIs that we thought were interesting to qualify what the health of those backgrounders are, how well they're running and what's going on the server. And those are mostly delay and duration. There's error rate, which can be important, and the volume, well, you gotta know what's going on the server and how much of it. So the delay, as you can see, interestingly, has been spiking in the last 24 hours up until here at 9 o'clock. This is, I think, local time here, yeah, because the server is in the UK. But this is a pattern we see every day, and we know that it's happening. But if we were to see something unusual, we'd want to take action on that. Like, you also see this spike here in error rate. What happened there? Well, it turns out there was someone who was trying to get, I think it was 15 different data sources based on Excel, trying to refresh without granting the account access to them. So it would just fail all over again, and he wouldn't understand why. And this is the moment where, we notice this, and, we just contact the guy and say, look, can we help you out and try and get this to work the way that it should, instead of having that happening. Can you imagine there's 3,000 extracts, 3,500 extracts running every day, and he manages to pull this up to like 27% error rate? That's quite a performance from this person. But anyway, he was very understanding and happy that we were there to help him. So that's one of the views. We detect anomalies in what happened in the last 24 hours when we get up and see this email in our inbox. So then what happens? Well, we probably want to take action on that. And in the case of that error rate guy, then I'd probably go to this dashboard, which is one that you might more or less recognize, because these little dots and lines and Gantt chart, you've seen that before probably. This is actually based on the existing view for background task refreshes, background refresh, yeah, whatever, the backgrounders and the extract refreshes on the server. And why would I go to this view? Well, that's because this gives you an indication of if an extract has failed, and if it has, then if I can find my mouse pointer, it will also tell me why it has failed and give me more information about that. So if I try and hover over that one there, that's not the one that failed. Let's see. I might want to duplicate my screen just for this section. That's going to be easier. Right. So one here. Let's see. So invalid username or password. Well, look at that. These are the error messages that you get in the other view as well. But we've put them all here. We have our same KPIs shown there. And again, why do I go to this dashboard after finding out about that? That's because I can take action from this one as well, and that's what's interesting about the new way, or the way we designed these new tools. We went a bit further than just reporting. We're actually trying to enable us to have to do less work through these dashboards. And let me give you an example. So for example, let's see, I'm interested in our LogShark extract refreshes, and let's say I know that I have to rerun it for some reason, or that it failed, and I know it's going to work now. Well, then you might have noticed this little link here that we have that says trigger extract refreshes. And what that will allow me to do is from this dashboard to connect to Tableau server, and then this is going to be using the REST API, and as I run that, I've just triggered from this dashboard the refresh of that extract. And I don't have to go back to Tableau server, I don't have to open another window to do that, I can do this all from the dashboard here. So one example of how we're trying to make our reporting on what's going on the server as actionable as possible would be this. So Yeah, very useful because, I mean, most of the time when an error occurs, people need to change their username or password. I just go in and rerun the extract for them and everyone's happy and everyone's running their extracts as they should again. So yeah, useful for that. There's other actionable dashboards that we also use regarding this published data. We're still all in the published data thing, so let's just give it a second to connect. But what this one is one that we used in the beginning where, you know, we were still undercored, as we would say. We're still underpowered, didn't have the cores we needed, but we tried to identify those worst offenders that were actually causing, you know, those delays in extract refreshes. And I see this guy here, Timothy Vermeiren, not doing very well because all of the longest running extracts are actually his. Yeah, I had to anonymize the dashboard, so I'm taking all of the blame today. But how is this actionable? Well, it shows me, you know, how people are scheduling. Are they, you know, scheduling frequently? And are they scheduling with increments or just full refreshes all the time? And that's important because, you know, most people think, oh, I don't know when the data is going to come in. It's somewhere between 3 and 4. I better schedule it every 15 minutes all day so I'm sure that it'll update as quickly as possible. No, please do not. And so this is looking quite okay. I mean, there are long-running ones, but we know of them and we know what they're doing. But this view back then would just be a horrible list of things being scheduled completely wrongly, things not being incremental where they could. And so again, we take action from this. Like this one here is one that takes quite some time and, you know, is used in quite a few workbooks, so that's okay. But the long-running ones here, I'm not very happy with. So I can select them and I can say, okay, I want to email the users who are responsible for these with a template. And again, this doesn't look very fancy, but we're still working on the Chrome for all this. Of course, you know, as long as we can take the action, that's fine. The rest is not as important. But so what this will do is it will use tab command to pull for the users I selected, and well, there's only me now, but it will pull their personalized version of this report, showing them the extracts that they should take action on. So we'll see that appearing in just a second. It just takes a few moments to query those. But the point is that using this, we will be able to automatically email the users with that personalized view, and to that we add a certain template with all kinds of information, links to resources, and what we can do to help them with the final purpose, of course, of educating the users. You know, we want them to know how they should be scheduling their extracts. We want them to be able to do it on their own and us not having to jump in to do this. So this is just some text to inform them of what's going on, and then there's the image that's part of it here with the 3 that are actually mine there, which are quite okay, I think. There's one that runs long, but yeah. So yeah, actionable, and the ability to you know, educate users through these views is interesting as well. I'm going to run through a few other ones that you might find interesting as well. A bit quicker though than we've shown these, because, you know, the point has been made. The thing is that we have good, clean reporting on what's happening. We have a quick way of taking action, and we have a way of educating the users. So the rest is, you know, the rest that I'm going to show you is a bit more of the geeking out part of the session, where you see, oh, this is cool. Maybe I could use this in my organization. And one of these is this one, and this is a very funny looking dashboard. I really went all wild on this one because I thought, you know, I'm going to do something unusual. We're switching now from the data area to the performance of the vises area, and I'm not going to pretend that all of the vises on here are super helpful, but they do give me the insights that I need. For example, the ones on the left, I'm sure you're asking what those are. They're actually clocks. This is the time of the day, with, I think, the bright green one being AM and the dark green one being PM, but showing me the thick line against the average over there. And so I can see here, the top part of the view is the number of requests, and this is the request time. And I see here, ooh, that's been a interesting moment there around 9 a.m. On that day. So I could go and see what happened then, and I can select, and I see, oh, right, there's been this view here, which took 1,200 seconds to load. That's not quite good, is it? So yeah, again, a quick overview of what's going on. We see the performance, how it's been, you know, the average load time over the past few days. This one's funny looking as well, but it's quite useful. It shows all of the views being requested, and then The ones on top here, obviously, being the worst ones and the ones we're going to want to take action on. And, well, seems like John Doe, in this case, is not doing very well with the performance of his visits. So yeah, there's this one. This is one I get in my mailbox every day as well. Always fun to look at. There's a similar view we use in here to do analysis on the content and to contact users. So similarly as before here, we have some workbooks that perform really bad, and we can then list those. And from this list, I can select, which ones I do want to email users about. This does the same thing as the other view, but then, to contact them about their workbooks. And then the template used is different, has information and resources on what they can do to improve that. So again, trying to educate the users here is quite key. Okay, given the time, I'm going to show you one more, and this is an interesting one too. Us as server admins primarily find it useful because sometimes, and I'm going to see if I have it open already. I don't think I do. No, I will open it. Sometimes people come to us, maybe based on that email they received, and they're asking us like, yeah, so my view, which you mentioned there, and this and that and this and that about it, but we have no idea what they're talking about. There's like 10,000 visits on the Tableau server. So what we'll do is just ask them, can you send us a link to the view? And we've got a dashboard here that does nothing but take that link on the top there, and when you enter that, it's going to give you information on the content that is behind it. So it kind of strips the URL and finds out which workbook it is, and then goes to the workgroup database as well as our LogShark data to find out what's been going on. It's a bit slow the first time you open it, but you'll see. There's quite a few data sources behind this. There's a performance from LogShark, there is usage from the workgroups, there is the data from the workgroups database as well. But this is what it gives us. And how is this useful? Well, again, us as server admins, we have no idea what they're talking about. But here, this will tell us, okay, so this was authored by, again, this same guy. Let's see, okay, he published it then, he's also updated it then. Okay, this is the revision it's at. So how's the performance of this thing? I see that the workbook itself, this one here we're looking at, that seems in the middle. This is a typical Pareto chart telling me that, it performs better than this. It's actually been doing quite well over the time. It hasn't, spiked in performance and whatever. So yeah, it gives me that info on performance. The usage as well, I see that for some reason it's very popular around that time. I see what data is used. This is useful too, because often we'll see, that workbook you're talking about with a bad performance has a live connection to some old system which you wouldn't want to run queries on. Well, make an extract out of it and problem solved. And so that's listed here as well. So yeah, a useful tool for us to quickly gain insights on something someone is talking to us about, which makes our lives a bit easier. And there's quite a few other tools, which I'll gladly discuss in case you have some ideas or thoughts about that after our session.
Switch it back for me.
Yes, I can do that. I probably should. So.
Okay, so our title had Cores Community Crowdsourcing. Obviously, Cores was a proxy for a whole lot of things, but that first part that we just went through covers what we meant by Cores. But as I said in the beginning, it's not just about the Cores. It's also about people. So how do you actually scale people? So back to a little storytelling. And go a little quicker this time. I mentioned earlier that there was a point at which we got to 1,000 users on Tableau server. I was supposed to be doing another job, and this was supposed to be side, a maximum of 40%. But I was full-time, handling nothing but supporting those 1,000 people. These were the innovators, the early adopters, who were very curious, had a lot of questions, needed to learn. I was learning. We were fixing things as we went along together. So all I was doing was handling support tickets. Obviously, that is not a way to grow a culture of analytics. So that was a fail. So what did we do? I actually didn't mean to click on that, so let's pretend that I didn't. Yeah, let's stay with that one. So my boss caught me. He finally realized I wasn't actually working on what I was supposed to be working on, and kind of gave me an ultimatum, and I'm like, oh no, I don't have anybody to help me. I have no money. The boss is saying I got to cut back, and that means all this enthusiasm and excitement around Tableau is going to wane. Of course, that actually never happens. So what to do? And I'm sitting there, pondering my misfortune when I happened to be scrolling through the Tableau community site. And it suddenly occurs to me that that's a rather brilliant model. Instead of having to put a lot of support together, and I know a lot of companies have done this, but Tableau was where I was looking and it was what I was familiar with. They've gotten us to actually do their support for them, and we do it for free. And not only for free, they give us fancy titles and give us rocks that really get us all excited. The Zen Master rock. Okay, all right. It's a very interesting approach to being able to get a community engaged, and also to help cut your cost, because we're taking care of each other most of the time. We all get on the forums, or we email each other, or however we do that doesn't usually involve, at our level, a call back to Tableau support. And I'm like, well, of course, this is exactly what I got to do. So I decided we're going to crowdsource support, and I'm not going to do it anymore. Yay! And I went home. No. So we didn't have a lot of resources at hand to do this. We had Yammer. So that's where I started. So I built a Yammer group. And I went and found the 3 or 4 people. And Elaine, are you in here? Is Elaine in here? No. Somebody from Cargill that's here this week was one of the first power users. And he was one of the ones that I went to as well. And we had like 3 or 4 people that knew enough to be able to help other people. And I begged and I pleaded and I did whatever they wanted. And in Elaine's case, I still do. And got them to help me do that. I posted 3 times a day. I didn't care if it was silly. I asked them to do the same thing and to put tidbits out there. And slowly we started trying to get a community going. And over time, we started directing our people to that Yammer group and asking them to share with each other and to talk to each other and to answer each other's questions and share things they've learned. And I very slowly began to push back on those help tickets. I stopped the emails. I did have to use a formal help system at the time, and slowly began to shut that down. We, in addition to the Yammer group and the SMEs, we also put in a support process. I never have liked the fact that I called it that, because it's actually crowdsourcing. But we gave people some basic, guidance. Go look at we put a wiki up as well as Yammer. Go look at the wiki. And if you can't find it, when you get the answer, put it in. So that was another example of something that we crowdsourced. Go look at the online resources that the vendors provide. Google, I am not your Google. As we slowly started getting people to understand that they could do this for themselves, it is self-service, that began to improve. And I began to get some of that time back, to the point where in the not too long after that, by the time we got to 2,000 users, I was not getting any emails anymore. And I was free to actually start working on getting that community to thrive and to be able to grow self-service at Cargill. From there, things just got better and better. My colleague that I mentioned earlier, my co-lead, joined, and he has a knack for education and services, which I do not. And he was able to begin to focus on that, which was sorely lacking in the community. And we began to grow those services and be able to, seed capabilities in other businesses. And our SME group grew. And that community finally began to thrive. Now it was a slow process, and some days I thought it was just going to fall over if I wasn't there to help prop it up. But it worked, and even though there were just 2 guys, no budget, no team, no executive sponsors.
You're thirsty, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. Thank you. Our community continued to grow. So this is where the folks that actually used the drive manual, had it on us. and where I had wished that had I known about that and had the resources to do the drive manual, it would have been great. But we didn't get the luxury of starting that way. So we came into it late, where it was now time to go find an executive sponsor and to find somebody that had money and to build a team and to be able to take that to the next level. But again, circumstances being what they were, we had a little bit of a difficult time, and there were still ways we had to go. We begged and borrowed consulting money, hired Timothy and one other person, and slowly began to be able to do more and more. Now, I haven't talked about numbers. I've mentioned a couple of thousand, 3,000. We have now today 6 people on our team. We have 17,000 people that are in our self-service analytics community. 7,000 of those are Tableau. It's a very big group, and we are serving them with this small team because of what we've done in order to focus on that community. I mentioned earlier, we're in a group called Digital Labs, and its mission is to prepare Cargill for a digital future. So they focus on tech, and they focus on data. And if you walk into their meetings and listen to what they're talking about, you'll hear all about the tech. You'll hear all about the data and the things that they've discovered that they're going to implement and put into the enterprise. You'll rarely hear them talk about people. So we knew exactly what our mission was going to be. We're there to prepare Cargill's people for a digital future. We have 155,000 people globally in 70 countries. 80,000 of those are knowledge workers. 17,000 of those are in our community today by the end of this FY, which is end of next May. 35,000 of them will be. The year after that, 80,000. All the knowledge workers will have access to our platforms, will be educated, have the capability to use the tools and to be able to do their own analytics. 3 years after that, we're going for all 155,000. And a little bit scaled back there, we're going to make sure that the rest are data literate, and we can all get together later and argue about what that definition means, since that's a very popular, controversial word right now. But it all hinged on the crowdsourcing. There's just no way in a traditional model to be able to support even the number of people we have today. If we sat down and built an organization chart, it would take probably 30 people. And there's no way my leadership is going to give me the money for 30 people. I barely got the money for 6 this year. But if you design it correctly, if you design it so that the community is the group that's actually doing the work, and oh, by the way, there is no team. We're part of the community too, and that's a very important thing to emphasize. There's no IT and biz. There's no team and then community. It's one community. You're all in it together. And building a model that works that way, where you focus on people first and not tech and data, will help that community grow to the point where you can do the sort of thing that we're doing at Cargill. We have a very small budget, and we have 3 platforms. We're running Tableau, Alteryx, and Power BI for those 17,000 people. We've got big plans to make that go even further. So this is a very important component, and that crowdsourcing is what we mean by scaling people, if you'll allow me the poetic license there. Now I forgot my clicker, and I've just wandered off. So I mentioned this, a refocus from platforms back to community. And part of that community, as I mentioned, is a team. You need a good team. You don't need a big one. You need a great team. We started out thinking about, what sort of people would be able to do this type of job, to both be platform experts and to be coaches, to be community cultivators, and basically we were looking for Zen Master unicorns. And I kid you not, that's actually what we told the recruiters. And it worked. We found Timothy. We've had a couple of others, and we're growing some skill and expertise inside the company to do similar sorts of jobs. But with that focus on people, not just, we've talked about community, but the team as well. Is a small team that's very passionate about what they're doing, We always talk about the passion that we have for the art of our job. We work very closely together. It's a mission that is not just about analytics. Yes, that's what we're doing at the moment, but we're helping people solve more than just how to do my analytics. We're modeling and teaching behaviors that they can take and apply elsewhere in order to do a better job, to have a better life, and it's making a big difference not only in the community but also in the company. This is something that's become mainstream, whereas 2 years ago, I was sneaking around corners and hoping nobody saw me. And our CTO, our CFO, our CIO, and the CEO himself are participating in our events. We've come all the way around the back end of the whole thing, but we've gotten to a point where we've now helped people understand that community matters, community works, crowdsourcing works. There's very little else that's going to enable you to scale at this size. Scaling hardware is one thing, but the important part is how you're going to scale your community and how you're going to scale your team and how you're going to combine all those things in order to accomplish the goals that you have for your culture of analytics. I think I had only, I said that. Oh, yeah, 6-person team, 17,000 people right now. We have no help desk, no support tickets, and that's not quite right. It might be 99. But we've got a community that the first thing they say is, we cannot believe how fast you respond to us and how willing you are to help. There's nothing like it else in the organization or in IT. I just put a few things up here that I probably all mentioned around things that we did for creating that community or creating that team. I emphasize the one community, but you also need a lot. We have one overarching one, but then we have one for platforms. We have one for various needs. You got to have a good social platform, a wiki or a QA tool. You need to identify and empower the champions that you find, not just your subject matter experts, necessarily, but those people that are going to go out and help evangelize. The community provides all our support. They self-govern. We don't do it. One thing we had to do, redefine self-service. Most people think self-service means I'm going to do it for me. I can get to my data. I can figure out my own problems, find some insight, and then I'm done. We don't let them do that. When they come to us, especially, the barter is, we help you, you help them, pass it on. And I think we mentioned all these others. One of the very important ones that I touched on earlier, model and teach behaviors, not just the tools. Knowing how to use a tool is helpful, but knowing how to work with data, to understand analytic methods, to know how to apply those so that you get good answers is even more important. And then the team, which I think I mentioned everything on there, except for we like to talk about being unreasonably aspirational. That goal I mentioned earlier of 150,000, we've already been told that that's too aggressive. We're doing it anyway. My boss says that my GADI is off the chart, and it's so beyond control that he just doesn't know what to do. If you don't know what GADI is, that's a very important component that goes along with passion. It's give a damn index. All right, so I think, you had...
I just wanted to conclude this, which you've already almost done, but the mic's on, thank you. That, I've seen this happening from outside a little bit. I mean, I worked for Cargill as a Tableau consultant before. I wasn't part of the team immediately. I was just developing dashboards for another project there. But I saw the way the community functioned. I saw the way that these people with that passion were helping each other out there. And I became part of that, obviously, as soon as I could, because I was, developing things there. But there are things that as an external person you don't know, you need to learn about the company itself. And they were very helpful, and I tried to be helpful back to them by sharing the Tableau knowledge that I have. And this led up to me joining the team. But again, seeing that growing, seeing that happening externally was really quite unique, I must say, because we at Biztory do offer services that are related. There's something, there's services on how to set up a classic center of excellence, which, comes close to this, but we are, as Biztory, also being inspired by what's happening at Cargill and, trying to think how we can work together and bring this to as many people as possible. And I think, well, a good start for this was the message that you've conveyed today, David. So, yeah.
All right, so please complete the survey. Mandatory slide in the deck there. Our contact information, which will be in the slide deck that I assume you will get at some point, I think. If not, come see us. We'll make sure you get that. Or yeah, you can take pictures. I'll wait a second. And yes, the N is not on his name. That's intentional. On the end of his Twitter handle.
Yes, there's another guy with the same name as me who happens to be a BI consultant as well, and he got the Twitter handle before me.
Okay, so we have, oh shoot, not all the time I wanted. We have a few minutes for questions or comments, if anyone has one. Yes, sir.
I have some theory, but to hear your opinion, why the new course didn't, let's say, reduce the average working time?
No, they did, but I think I didn't convey the message very well. The point was that our efforts just before, you saw that drop before the course were added, but that was a time we worked on that all the time. We were actually monitoring constantly the course, allowed us to leave that behind, and it was just running as a healthy platform on its own without us intervening all the time, restarting services from time to time and things like that. So it just solidified and as I said, made for a healthier platform.
You got the...
I can just pull it up, can't
that
I?
is... Yeah, so we are at 32 cores.
Yes.
And as I mentioned, that is undercored. We should actually be at about 48 or maybe even 64 at this point. We're in the middle of negotiating an EA, and as soon as it's signed, I'm throwing everything in the kitchen sink at it. So that's going to be fixed for the first time in a while, but right now we are a little bit behind, which is why these tools are still very important. And I would point out that is not what Timothy does all day long. This is a small part of what he does during the day. Those tools make the difference between working the way I did and working the way he does now.
Yeah, I think we should mention about the tools. I omitted that before, but these tools we're also making available to the community. So our setup is we have many sites which are for enterprises, for teams, for departments, and we give them these tools to enable the community as well to do our work. So that's something I think worth mentioning. Yeah.
Do you have only one platform, or is it somehow mirrored across the world, across your globally? That you need some server in Asia, some server in Europe, or something like that?
No, it's just one central setup at this point. We're starting to consider and look at that because, as most people probably have the same sort of issues, either in South America, Brazil, or in some places in APAC, that we will probably begin to look at doing that, but no, we're not doing it yet.
What's your point about tooling? And we're very template, and I understand it's not really too valuable. I have no idea where to start building. What sort of resources can we pull to sort of
Yeah, so most of that comes from Tableau's internal repository, so the work groups. We use the TabMon that was mentioned, TabMon data as well as LogShark data, and we use TabJolt to do some testing as well. If you'd like to discuss that more in depth and very specifically, I'll be at the Biztory booth downstairs most of the day, so we can dive into that.
So you mentioned you have 3 to 6. How do they fit
So there's the two co-leads. I am responsible. I've been carrying this around, not using it all day. I apologize. I lead the platform side. My colleague leads the education and services. So that's 2 people. And then we have Timothy is the subject matter expert and the coach for Tableau. The same thing for Alteryx. And then we have 2 on PBI because that group's a little bit bigger and less mature. But we're starting to change that now. That's how we've worked in the past. But as we grow our team, we're going to need to get a little more specialized. Nobody calls the help desk. The help desk wouldn't know what to do. You post your question on Yammer, or we have a shared inbox that is meant to be a last resort. Isn't always the case, but we're using that for the moment until something better comes along.
What's the reason you also have Power BI?
I inherited it. I didn't choose it. We actually have, 70 businesses, 70 countries, 155,000 people. We have something like 50, 55 businesses that are separate. Some of them make lots of money, some of them don't. Tableau up until now has, and Alteryx especially, there's a price barrier there. And PBI came in right out of the gate with very low entry cost, and it appealed to a lot of folks, and we already had an O365 agreement, so it was already there, and they gave us 10,000 licenses, so it got used. Now, people, realize that low entry cost isn't the whole thing, but that's how that happened. I would actually have to read my email, which I don't. Not anymore.
So very formally, it's 11:30 now, so the session's technically ended. We of course want to thank you for attending. I'm sure that some of you may still have questions, so I think we can hang around here for a few minutes still.
Or outside.
Or outside, yeah, because there's going to be another one. And then, as I mentioned, we're going to be around the booths downstairs as well. You'll find me at Biztory's, obviously.
I'll be following him around.
Thank you.